Police feminized me for being naughty. When Alan was 11, he was once taken along to visit one of his mother's friends. She went there often, but Alan rarely joined her. This time, though, it was school holidays, and since there was no one at home to watch him, and his mother wouldn't leave him alone, he had no choice but to go. As soon as they arrived, the two women settled into their conversation, leaving Alan to entertain himself upstairs with the woman's daughters. Emma, who was a year older than him, and Jane, who was a year younger, were already deep into an imaginative game. They had turned their bedroom into the setting of a make-believe criminal gang story. Emma played the boss, while imaginary accomplices filled out the rest of the crew. Jane took on multiple roles: shopkeepers, police officers, and bank employees, switching characters whenever needed. The bottom bunk of their bed doubled as a jail cell for any captured gang members. Alan was quickly pulled into the game, assigned the role of Emma's right-hand man. It wasn't exactly the kind of game he usually enjoyed. He preferred action-packed things like battles or adventure, but it was still more exciting than playing with dolls or having pretend tea parties. After a few pretend robberies, Emma decided their gang needed better disguises for their next big job: a bank heist. She rummaged through a costume box and tossed Alan a tartan-patterned skirt along with a frilly blouse. "This is your disguise," she declared. "You're going in as a Scottish person." Alan frowned immediately. "I'm not wearing that. That's a skirt." "It's not a skirt," Emma shot back confidently. "It's a kilt. Scottish men wear them all the time." Alan hesitated. "It still looks like a skirt." Emma crossed her arms. "I'm the leader. If you want to stay in the gang, you follow the rules. Now put it on." Reluctantly, Alan took the clothes, trying to convince himself she might be right. Maybe it was supposed to be a kilt. Even so, it didn't really look like one he'd seen before. Emma insisted he change properly. First, she had him swap his t-shirt for the frilly blouse. He complained, but she argued that it matched the kilt, and eventually he gave in. Then came the skirt itself, wrapped around his waist while he still looked unsure. When he tried to leave his trousers underneath, Emma objected again. It took several more minutes of back and forth before she convinced him to remove them entirely. She even insisted that, like real Scottish men, he shouldn't wear anything underneath. Though doubtful, Alan eventually gave up arguing. Before long, he found himself acting out the bank robbery in full costume. Frilly blouse, short pleated skirt and all, rushing around the spare room as part of the game. Jane soon announced that the alarm had been triggered, and Alan had to make a dramatic escape, racing back toward their hideout with imaginary police in pursuit. By the time he burst back into the bedroom, Emma was already preparing the next part of their plan. Emma suddenly announced that Alan had been followed and that the police were closing in. In a rush to cover their tracks, she began getting rid of anything that might give them away. Unfortunately for Alan, that included his actual clothes, which Emma hurriedly tossed out of the bedroom window into the garden below. Before he could protest, Jane, fully committed to her role as the police officer, burst in and declared him under arrest. Still dressed in the frilly blouse and tartan outfit, Alan was taken into custody. To make it more convincing, Jane tied his wrists behind his back using one of her hair ribbons, acting as though he were a real criminal being secured. While Emma pretended to plan a daring rescue, Jane began interrogating her prisoner. "So you thought you could fool everyone with that disguise?" she said sternly. "I wasn't pretending to be anything," Alan replied quickly. "I was just, being Scottish." Jane folded her arms. "Nice try. We caught you red-handed hiding money. That disguise didn't work at all." "It's not what you think," Alan insisted, trying to stay in character. "I was putting money into the bank, not taking it." "Sure you were," Jane shot back. "We've got all the evidence we need. That's 10 years in prison. Sergeant Teddy Bear, take him away." She marched him over to the bunk bed, pushing him onto the lower bunk that served as their cell. With his wrists tied, Alan awkwardly tried to pull the hem of his outfit down as he landed, feeling exposed and uncomfortable. Jane then picked something up from the floor and held it out with a mischievous grin. "And don't even think about escaping," she warned, "or I'll make you deal with this." It was a toy spider, but Alan, who hated spiders, didn't care whether it was real or not. He let out a sharp yelp, scrambling off the bed despite his tied hands and rushing to the other side of the room. Laughing, Jane followed him, waving the spider around. Alan darted back and forth, trying to avoid it, But the door was closed and his hands were bound, leaving him trapped. Both girls burst into laughter at his frantic reactions. Finally, Jane tossed the spider out the window and turned back, still giggling. Emma grinned. "You screamed like a little kid," she teased. "I did not." Alan snapped, his face burning with embarrassment, especially now that he was suddenly aware of how he was dressed. "Yes, you did," Emma insisted. "That was definitely a scream." Alan shook his head, flustered and defensive, but the girls soon lost interest in teasing him and returned to their game. Jane untied his wrists only to retie them, this time to the bedpost, keeping him locked up. She then pretended to fill out paperwork, chatting with her stuffed toy partner about catching the rest of the gang. Meanwhile, Emma changed outfits, putting on an old apron to disguise herself as a cleaner sneaking into the prison. Carrying a bag, she acted out tidying the room until Jane's suspicion faded. When the moment was right, she slipped closer and whispered, "I'm here to get you out." "Then hurry," Alan whispered back, eager to be free, still feeling awkward and exposed. "Untie me." "Not yet," Emma murmured. "We have to wait for the right moment, just in case the guard is watching." Emma froze for a split second, then whispered urgently that if anyone walked in they needed a story, fast. Her imagination kicked in, spinning a childish game where Alan could escape only by becoming someone else entirely. In her version, the only foolproof disguise was a princess. After all, no police officer would mistake a princess for a runaway boy. Alan protested immediately, refusing over and over, but with his wrists still tied, his resistance didn't get him far. Emma was already digging through her bag, pulling out bright pink underwear and sliding it up his legs before he could stop her. She worked quickly, adjusting everything into place as if this were the most normal thing in the world. Next came his hair. She gathered his blonde curls into 2 bunches and tied them off with oversized pink ribbons, stepping back with a satisfied grin. "See? Only little girls with ribbons scream like that at spiders," she teased. Before he could respond, she dabbed shiny pink lipstick onto his lips. She removed the skirt he'd been wearing and revealed a frilly blouse underneath, then reached into her bag again. This time she pulled out a dress, soft pink satin with lace trimming the neckline and sleeves. It was elaborate, with puffed shoulders and a wide, layered skirt that looked like it belonged in a fairy tale. "Quick, step in," she urged, holding it open. "Before she comes back." "I'm not wearing that," Alan snapped, his face burning. "Untie me. I'll get my own clothes." Emma shook her head. "Not unless you want everyone downstairs to see you like this. Either wear it or stay stuck here." Caught between embarrassment and panic, Alan hesitated too long. Emma took that as agreement and guided the dress up over him, fastening it neatly at the back. When she stepped away, he immediately tried to undo it but couldn't reach the zipper. By the time policewoman Jane returned, Emma had turned the whole situation into a performance. Alan, now reluctantly introduced as Princess Allison, had to curtsy and insist on his innocence. The act dragged on, with toys joining in as part of the interrogation. Sitting there, surrounded by layers of fabric, Alan caught sight of himself in the mirror. His long hair, tied with ribbons, framed his face in a way he barely recognized. For a moment, his frustration mixed with a strange curiosity. He didn't like being forced into it, yet he couldn't ignore how different he looked, and how oddly convincing the illusion was. When one of the toys spoke to him, he stumbled over his words. "Hello, princess. What's your name?" "Alan, no, I mean," he flushed deeply. "Princess Allison." The game continued, and despite himself he found he was playing along, answering questions and defending his new identity. "I think you're just pretending," the toy accused. "No," he said quickly, swallowing his embarrassment. "I'm a real princess. My name is Allison." The ground to swallow him up. "Do you have to wear bras yet, Allison? What boys do you like?" But Alan could not bring himself to even pretend an answer. "Aha, you are the criminal. You're just wearing a dress to escape prison. Quick, Sergeant Teddy Bear, lock him up again." Alan found himself quickly tied to the bed again, this time in the pink dress with ribbons in his hair. "And for being so naughty I sentence you to be tickled," laughed Jane as she descended on the helpless satin-clad Alan and began to tickle him mercilessly. Emma laughed and joined in. Ignoring Alan's protest, begging and girlish squeals, suddenly there was a knock on the door. The girls stopped tickling him and Alan squirmed about on the bed, still tied skirts and disarray and desperately trying not to be seen if someone else should enter the room. Finish your game up now, girls. Alan's mom will be taking him home soon. Okay, Mom yelled. Emma will be finished soon. You've got until we finish our cups of tea. They heard the girl's mother walk away. Downstairs, Jane ran downstairs to fetch Alan's clothes while Emma untied him and began to undo the dress. Jane reappeared and threw Alan's clothes onto the bed. He picked up his underpants and saw a spider from the garden crawling about on them. He screamed again and threw them back out of the window. Jane and Emma laughed and refused to fetch them for him this time, so he was forced to keep the pink panties on while he removed the dress and put his jeans and t-shirt on. He was going downstairs to get his underpants from the garden when he realized he still had the two pink ribbons in his hair. Quickly he pulled them out and put them back in the girls' room. He reached the bottom of the stairs as his mother was coming from the kitchen. She had her coat on and was ready to go. Come on then, Alan, she said, heading for the front door. Wait a minute, Mom, he said, heading for the back door. She grabbed his arm and stopped him. No more time for playing. Let's go now. You can always come back around another day and finish your little game off. But Mom, no, come on, it's dinner time. You'll see the girls again in a couple of days. Say goodbye and get in the car. Alan said goodbye to Emma and Jane and left the house with his mom. As they sat in the car driving home, his mom gave him a strange look. Were you playing some sort of dressing up game? Alan blushed. The memory of the dress and how his hair looked in pink ribbons fresh in his mind, and the feel of the pink panties on his body embarrassing him as he sat there. Yes, we did. I thought so, replied his mother, and I'd suggest you wash her face when we get home. You seem to be wearing lipstick.